Wait, creepypastas were good? Yeah, there were. There were so many amazing and engaging creepypastas being written at the subgenre's inception and when it started getting popularity on the wider internet. Unfortunately, as the years have gone on, and I don't think I'm the only one who's noticed this, they've really gone downhill in quality. Okay, that's fine, you may be thinking. There's always been more bad ones than good ones, even in the genre's heyday. But I think this problem of worse creepypastas goes way deeper than just generally bad writing. I think the core of what made creepypastas a unique subgenre has been lost. But what was it? What did make creepypastas unique? Well, that's what I'm going to explore. I hope you find that idea interesting, and if you do, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. So what did make old creepypastas unique? Well, I want to answer that question by first answering a different question. How do you convince someone that the unreal is real? This is a question that storytellers have asked a lot over the years, and it always boils down to something called suspension of disbelief. It's easier to do this in some genres than it is others. Like, even though I know Die Hard isn't real, I know that people kill other people with guns in real life all the time, so it's a lot easier for me to suspend my disbelief when John McClane does the holy shit, that was badass. But it's a lot harder to get the audience to suspend their disbelief when it comes to things that we know aren't real. Fantasy and sci-fi tend to get away with it because they're either set in completely different worlds, and that's established early on. Completely different worlds with completely different rules, or they're so far into the future that they might as well be completely different worlds. Horror has a hard time with it because 9 times out of 10, it's set in our real reality, but it contains those supernatural elements which most of the audience knows aren't real. So of course, it's gonna be a lot harder for the audience to suspend their disbelief about it unless the author does something about that. In his essay, Notes on Writing Weird Fiction, H.P. Lovecraft discusses this problem and how he fixes it. I'm gonna be reading a really long quote here, so here's some Subway Surfers for y'all. Don't click off yet. One cannot, except in immature pulp charlatan fiction, present an account of impossible, improbable, or inconceivable phenomena as a commonplace narrative of objective acts and conventional emotions. Inconceivable events and conditions have a special handicap to overcome, and this can be accomplished only through the maintenance of a careful realism in every phase of the story except that touching on the one given marvel. This marvel must be treated very impressively and deliberately, with a careful emotional build-up, else it will seem flat and unconvincing. Being the principal thing in the story, its mere existence should overshadow the characters and events, but the characters and events must be consistent and natural except where they touch the single marvel. In relation to the central wonder, the characters should shew the same overwhelming emotion which similar characters would shew towards such a wonder in real life. Never have a wonder taken for granted. Even when the characters are supposed to be accustomed to the wonder, I try to weave an air of awe and impressiveness corresponding to what the reader should feel. A casual style ruins any series. So what Lovecraft's really saying is that he treats every aspect of the story as realistically as possible, has an effective, steady build-up to the supernatural reveal, and then once it's revealed, he has the characters react realistically to it. Now, another really good writer who's written about the art of writing horror is Thomas Ligotti. Thomas Ligotti wrote a short experimental horror story called Notes on the Writing of Horror, a Story, which was published in his collection Songs of a Dead Dreamer. Now, this story is like part literary essay and part an actual horror story, but I think there's still some really good insights we can glean from this. In it, he says there are 3 main ways that horror writers tend to write horror, but I'm going to focus on 2 of them right now. And the first way is called the realistic way. On realistic horror, Ligotti says the highest aim is to prove in realistic terms that the unreal is real. Okay, we established that. He also says that this is impossible, so the writer can only seem to smooth out the ultimate paradox. But how do you do this? Well, take an example of this character Nathan that he writes about. Thomas Ligotti says, in just what way, amid all the realism of Nathan's life, does the supernatural sneak past inspectors normal and real standing guard at the gate? Well, sometimes it steps softly, by inches, until it crashes the party. He's talking about the same thing Lovecraft did. It's just effective build-up to the reveal. Thomas Ligotti also talks about the traditional Gothic way to write stories, which he says are fearsome, fantastical, and inhuman. These Gothic tales tend to be a lot more emotional, exaggerated, and larger than life. Basically, everything in a Gothic tale is purposefully unrealistic. So that way, when the supernatural elements come in, it doesn't seem so silly by comparison. To quote Thomas Ligotti on the 2 advantages of Gothic writing, isolated supernatural incidents don't look as silly in a gothic tale as they do in a realistic one, and a gothic tale gets under a reader's skin and stays there far more insistently than other kinds of stories. And I think that's just because of how inherently more emotional they are. So Thomas Ligotti's solution to suspension of disbelief in horror is twofold. Basically, either do what Lovecraft does with effective buildup, or make your entire story so unrealistic that it doesn't matter. So that's how most horror authors accomplish suspension of disbelief. How do creepypastas do it? See, in my opinion, this is where creepypastas get into some kind of weird territory, because they're not written to just be realistic and grounded stories. They're written to have literally taken place in our world. They're often written in the form of, or to be understood as, a series of blog posts, just a single post on a website, like a personal website, forum threads, things like that, things that you would just naturally stumble upon on the internet. It is the ultimate hurdle for suspension of disbelief. Now, because of this, they're often written in a very, plain everyman kind of way. They're not written with a lot of metaphors or literary language. They're just written like how somebody would post on the internet. So if we're looking at Thomas Ligotti's spectrum from realistic to gothic, they stand firmly in the realistic territory of things. Let's look at some examples from older creepypastas that are considered classics of the genre. Candle Cove is a personal favorite of mine, and it isn't even written as a proper story with a plot as we would understand it. The entire story is just an archive of a forum thread that talks about this creepy old TV show that the characters used to watch. Ted the Caver is literally one of the best creepypastas ever written, and it's written as a series of blog posts on Ted's Angelfire website. Anansi's Goatman, another classic, is literally a series of posts on 4chan's Xboard that appeared in a thread of green text where the point of that thread was to recount real paranormal experiences. Of course, it is X, so only a fool would take anything posted there as fact. Still, it's fun to speculate, and that's what's so great about this level of immersion. So what can we learn from these? Well, a lot of these stories were written in a very casual, hey guys kind of tone that makes it feel authentically amateur. Even if these stories weren't explicitly posted to a forum or on a personal webpage, they're always written in that form. Dead Bart, a flawed but genuinely eerie creepypasta, was never posted to a forum or I don't think it was anyway, but it was still written in that style. Okay, I'm getting sick of this. What is wrong with my hands? Why can't I just be normal? Why can't I just be normal when filming? Look, for any other kind of horror stories, this would be objectively terrible writing. But for creepypastas, it's the only way they should be written. If you're gonna tell a horror story as if it actually happened, you have to say it like it actually happened, like you're actually telling it to someone, omitting any of the flowery language that you probably wouldn't just say to your friend if you were telling them a spooky experience that happened to you. Okay, so far this has been about older creepypasta writing, which is interesting, but what does it have to do with modern creepypasta sucking? Well, like I said in the intro, a lot of newer creepypastas have kind of forgotten all of that stuff that I mentioned that made the older creepypastas so great. So, in order to explore that further, let's dive right into the cesspit that is, trigger warning, the NoSleep subreddit. I looked through the front page of the NoSleep subreddit as I was making this video, and I've noticed that practically none of them are written like how a creepypasta is normally written, like how it should be written. Everything is in this over-described, heavy prose, atmospheric kind of voice, which would be decent for a novel, but for the NoSleep subreddit about creepypastas, it takes me out of the story because I know no real person is going to talk like that when they're talking about their creepy experience. I mean, it says right on the subreddit rules that it has to be written like it's real, like it really happened and you're recounting this experience, but nobody talks like this. Look, they wouldn't even have a lot of dialogue in their story because nobody's remembering all of that if you're going through a traumatic experience, at least not word for word like this. And they definitely wouldn't have 30 parts? 30? Dude, I don't even know if your story is bad, but just write a book, please. One of the main things that makes NoSleep stand out from other subreddits is those rules I mentioned, that you have to treat every story like it's real. When you're writing it, and when you're reading it. You're not even allowed to call them creepypastas, but guys, let's not kid ourselves. They're creepypastas. They're meant to be creepypastas. And this leads to people in the comments like role-playing and playing along with the story as if it actually happened, which kind of sucks. Okay, stop! I know what you're gonna say. I'm being hypocritical here, aren't I? I mean, I was just talking about immersion, treating it like it's a real forum thread. Well, nope. You would be wrong, and you would be stupid. Let me explain. Okay, look, that was a bit harsh. In theory, you're right. It would be better for immersion, like what I was talking about. But the thing is, in practice, it creates two main problems. For one, it makes the common writing style of most no-sleep stories even worse. How am I supposed to be immersed in this world that No Sleep is trying to build when it has all of the markers of a fiction novel in it? Now, if every story was written in the style of Ted the Caver, I would actually be all for this. I'd be a lot more forgiving of it. But they're not. They're all written like novels. In order to keep immersion, it means the commenters and the people reading the stories can't give any feedback to the author. It literally states in the rules, you cannot give feedback. If you're a self-respecting author, do not post on this subreddit, I'm begging you. No Sleep stories are also generally terrible because they're just not scary. There's so many stories on there that devolve from horror to like an action adventure or like some shit you'd see in an anime. Well, I remember listening to one story, I don't remember what it's called, where it started out actually kind of promising, but it devolved into some weird, like, Jujutsu Kaisen shit, where the main character group was getting escorted out of the forest by this, like, hot forest spirit thing, and all the while they were being chased by these Wendigo or crawler creatures that the hot forest spirit thing had to kill. And then they got to a clearing where they think they're safe, but then the giant boss monster comes out of the forest to attack them. And it and the hot forest spirit thing kill each other in the battle. But it's okay, because the main character resurrects the hot forest spirit thing. This is a horror subreddit, right?
Whatever happened to the concept of less is more?
But less is more than just think how much more and more will be.
Honestly, guys, I don't think many people would care that it's not written like a creepypasta if the stories were just good. The subreddit has zero quality control, and most of the stories on there would be bad even if they were written like creepypastas. But when your rules literally forbid all kinds of constructive criticism, what do you expect? Okay, so we've established why creepypastas nowadays kind of suck. But how do you fix it? How do you write a good old-school creepypasta? Well, taking cues from what we know about realistic writing from H.P. Lovecraft and Thomas Ligotti, combining that with some trends in older classic creepypastas, I've come up with a strange list of rules, I'm just kidding, it's a regular list of rules, for how to write a good old-school creepypasta. 1. There should be enough build-up to the fantastical elements that it's not shocking in a way that breaks reader immersion. I think there could be a bit of a hook in the beginning, like, you know, most creepypastas and green text have that, holy shit, something super spooky just happened to me at the very beginning, but after that, you need to have enough build-up to the actual reveal. 2. You need a first-person retrospective point of view in an everyman dialogue and cadence. First-person retrospective means that it's told in a first-person point of view with the character recalling or reflecting on things that happened in the past. This is the most basic and most important thing about a creepypasta to get right. They're called the campfire stories of the internet for a reason. Just think about how most campfire stories are told and write your story like that. And look, guys, I don't want people to get it twisted. I like stories that are written in a very flowery and poetic language. I'm not some illiterate troglodyte. I was literally just quoting H.P. Lovecraft. He's one of my favorite authors, okay? I just know when to separate styles from different genres and subgenres. And creepypastas, in my opinion at least, should not be written in that way. At least very, very sparingly. Creepypastas need that raw, real feeling of just some dude telling the internet what happened to him. 3. Don't pad with the details that aren't immediately relevant to the story. And honestly, this is just good general writing advice. I mean, you can probably get away with it in regular stories for purposes of world building and character development, but look, would you really go 4 whole pages describing the scenery if you were trying to tell a friend that you were chased by a big scary deer monster in the woods? I mean, I know someone who might, but I don't think you would. See, if you want a good example of info dumping like that done right in a creepypasta, just look at Ted the Caver. Ted the Caver goes into detail when it comes to like cave exploring and the caving equipment, but it also makes sense to put that in the story for the reader to understand what's going on. Because most people who are reading creepypastas were born with self-preservation instincts and don't enjoy caving. Look, all I say is just don't overdo it and try to make it make sense. 4, don't add too much poetic language or flair to it. You should absolutely do this for a regular horror short story or a horror novel. You should not do this for a creepypasta. It's going to have the opposite of the intended effect, and it'll take the reader out of your story like that. So, do all creepypastas on NoSleep suck ass? Is it all doom and gloom from here on out? Well, no, there's actually some really good stories on NoSleep. There's some classics on NoSleep. I mean, that's where I'm a Search and Rescue Officer was started. That's a really good creepypasta that's written like a creepypasta. My Dead Girlfriend keeps messaging me on Facebook, and If You're Armed and at the Glenmont Metro, Please Shoot Me are other really good examples. It's just, they're all also pretty old, with the most recent one being Glenmont Metro, which was written 6 years ago. And those both also follow the rules that I've mentioned mostly to the letter. I mean, with some exception, right? There's no story is perfect, but they get most of it pretty good. They feel like old school creepypastas, at least to me. And I'm just gonna say it, there's even some exceptions that completely break all of these rules, but they're still really good. I mean, obviously, there's Borrasca and the Left-Right game. They're basically novellas, right? They're not written like creepypastas at all. But they're good, so I don't really care. And the cool thing, the Left-Right game was actually clever, okay? Because it's written in that prose style that you would see in a novel, right? But the main character is a journalist who was taking extensive notes and was basically going to write a gonzo journalism piece on it. So of course they would be writing like that. That makes sense. But in my opinion, they're still not really creepypastas. They're horror stories. And I don't want anybody to get into a, I like pancakes, oh, so you hate waffles kind of argument in the comments. Okay, I like these stories. I'm not saying they're bad stories. They are kind of bad creepypastas, though. Because creepypastas need to have that immersion that I was talking about. And honestly, maybe I'm just being elitist. Maybe I'm just completely off base. Feel free to talk about it in the comments, but I just want y'all to know that I'm not like blindly hating on Borrasca or the Left-Right game just because I don't think they're really creepypastas. Although the Left-Right game, I would argue, is pretty close. And again, look, maybe I'm being a bit too restrictive. Again, let's talk about it in the comments. I just think it's sad that we don't get too many creepypastas like the old ones. It's a strange feeling that you don't really get from a normal story. That feeling of browsing the weirder parts of the internet at 3 a.m. and then you click on a weird link and you may have stumbled upon something that you shouldn't have seen. It's a crazy, really immersive feeling. You can't get that in a horror novel. I hope to see the style come back someday. Oh, hell, maybe I'll write one. You know, be the change you want to see.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the first video on my channel. Since this is the first video, I do just want to briefly introduce myself for anybody who cares and go over my plans for this channel. So, I'm Michael Knight, and I have a passion for storytelling. Storytelling in any medium. Most of the time that manifests as like writing fiction, like novels or short stories, but I've also dabbled in screenplays, and I even have some ideas for video games that I would like to learn how to make someday. In real life, I'm an honors student at a community college majoring in business, and I'm very active in school with classes and extracurriculars. I'm hoping to eventually go into a 4-year school one day, and then once I finish out my bachelor's, go on to law school. And honestly, even if by some miracle this channel takes off, I'm still probably going to go ahead and do that, just because it's something I'm genuinely interested in. Yeah, if you guys stick around long enough, you'll probably find out I'm one of those people that's cursed with being genuinely interested in too many things. As for the content on this channel, it's mostly going to be video essays in the same vein as this one, mostly focusing on horror content or just storytelling content in general, but I also really don't want to restrict myself with the kind of content that I make. I'm going to be experimenting with different kinds of videos like, vlogs, skits, some gaming-related videos, or other just in-real-life content. Some of that also involving stuff I'm doing at college, because I do think it's interesting enough to be put in a video format, but I guess we'll find out soon enough, right? But a constant through line for that will be these video essays. So, in other words, For a while, I'm just going to be throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. I'll also be posting and self-publishing my own stories at some point, so if you're into anything in the vein of horror, action, adventure, thrillers, anything like that at all, then stay tuned for that. If any of that sounds interesting to you at all, then please subscribe and stay tuned for more content. Also, please leave a like and comment on this video. It will help out with the algorithm and help me get seen more. I'll see you all in the next one, whatever that winds up being.